Namaste and welcome viewers. You're watching India Tonight. I'm Ashish Parekh, also being joined by my colleague Ankur Mishra from the Mumbai studio. Lots lined up on this broadcast. But before we get to all that, let's take a look at our top story. This Bihar's election battle continues to heat up as the NDA unveils its manifesto today, promising over 1 crore jobs through a statewide scale census, 100 MSME parks, and also a 50 lakh crore investment push. Women also get a 2 lakh aid under Mission Crorepati plus free ration and also 125 units of power. The Mahagathbandhan, if you remember, had also come up with a government job per family, 2,500 monthly for women, 200 units of free electricity and also loan waivers. Tejashwi calls it a total transformation for the state of Bihar. Both the sides have already pledged millions of jobs and billions in welfare, but Bihar's debt stands at rupees 3 lakh crore.
And the bigger question is, where will the money come from? Growth-led revenue, says NDA. Critics call both plans fiscally reckless. With the polling starting on November 6, Bihar's youth and farmers will decide promises or possibilities. And this is a big question we'll ask tonight. We have with us an eminent panel, Mr. Balasubramanian, a Senior Vice President, Team Leads, as well as Sanjeev Srivastava, political commentator. Gentlemen, welcome to India Tonight. I want to understand from you first, Mr. Srivastava, the promises have been made, but if you see the fiscal maths, just giving you few facts, this time when budget was presented, the projected fiscal deficit was 3%. But if you see last year's, it came at 9%. So the differentiation is there, the gap is wide, but these kind of poll promises have been made especially for jobs. Do you think this is fiscally sustainable?
So, Ankur, very good evening to you and the viewers and my fellow panelists. See, you don't have to be an economist or an expert on fiscal numbers and revenue deficit or fiscal deficit or how much 3 lakh crores shortfall is there in their revenues to really look through the promises made on both sides. It's simply inconceivable as to how Tejaswi and the Mahagathbandhan can give a government job to each family, in each family. And similarly, it's completely unsustainable or unbelievable or in the realms of some kind of fantasy to create 1 crore jobs as the NDA has promised this morning in their manifesto. So if we look at the national picture, are those kind of jobs being created anywhere? Is Bihar any different? If anything, Bihar is poorer than so many other states. Bihar is much more a challenging fiscal, economic, infrastructural environment than other places. So I think even the voters look through these promises. The parties think that the voters can be lulled into some kind of, or they are so vulnerable they'll believe anything. But voters don't. Voters will be deciding on so many different variable factors in the elections. I think least of all will be this kind of competitive populism. Or yes, definitely the NDA scheme of 10,000 rupees for women, that will make an impact on the ground as far as women voter is concerned. I'm quite certain and one can also see the backdrop. Last 3-4 elections, ever since 2000, mid 2000s, in the first decade, women have largely veered towards or leaned towards or voted for Nitish Kumar. First, it was the bicycle scheme, then prohibition, and now this 10,000 rupees thing. But other than that, and there are many counterpoints for which they may lean towards Mahagathbandhan. But these job promises,
Mr.
I don't
Srivastava will
think...
get into the details of the absurdity of the claims and also whether it's deliverable or not. Let me go across to Balasubramanian as well. Mr. Balasubramanian, now, both the parties have ruled Bihar at different times. Nitish Kumar, not very long ago, claimed that he created 8 lakh jobs in 15 years between 2005 and 2020. Tejashwi Yadav claims that while he was the deputy CM, he created 5 lakh jobs in 17 months. Now, the data that we have, shows Bihar as just over 10 to 11 lakh total government employees built over several decades now. Now, the big question, of course, every single voter from Bihar and across the nation would be watching and asking is, how can someone create 1 crore jobs in 5 years when the entire government machinery took 75 years to create 10 to 11 lakh jobs? Is this really a promise that can be fulfilled, or are they just now, not caring about whether something is deliverable or not? They just want to win election at any cost.
Firstly, good evening and thank you so much for having me over, Ashish and Ankur. I don't really claim to be an expert on whether this is doable or not, but I'd like to try and put this number in perspective first. Now, 1 crore looks like a staggering figure, especially for just one state. But again, Bihar as a whole has a population of 13 crore people, and that on the denominator of Indian population of 145 crores is nearly about 9%. And India's total workforce is about 60 odd crores. So creating 1 crore jobs on that kind of denominator is not such a staggering feat. I mean, well, it is a staggering feat if it's delivered, but then it's not as big a number as it may seem at first. The other fact here is that while there are 13 crore plus people in Bihar, there are another 3 crore people from Bihar who work outside Bihar within India. To put this in perspective, there is a whole lot of discussion and debate about brain drain from India to the US. There is only about half a crore Indians who work in the US today. But imagine the brain and brawn drain happening from Bihar to within India, which is about 3 crores. That's 6 times of the whole Indian diaspora that's living in the US, which is just one state's contribution to all the other states. So, and yes, the kind of government jobs that we have seen being created in the past may not be the same that they are planning to create in the future, because it could come in the form of various gig work as well. It could be gig work in the construction, infrastructure projects, and yes, other schemes which may not and need not really be permanent in nature. But what is really required is to put the machinery in motion where people from Bihar have a reliable source of employment and income within Bihar itself.
Right.
Because we as a staffing company have seen so many people from Bihar having to
Mr.
migrate to
Mr.
other states, and they
Balasubramaniam,
struggle with
Ankur, I'll just
accommodation,
ask a
food,
quick
etc.
follow-up question there. Mr. Balasubramaniam, with all due respect, there are two different aspects to this. One is creating jobs and second is paying salaries. Now, of course, even if they somehow magically create a formula to create all of these jobs, how do they pay the salaries? Now, data points to the fact that Bihar's dependency on center is 74% of its revenue. The per capita income, if you look at Bihar, 66,800 is the lowest in India. So even if they somehow magically come up with vacancies, where is the money to pay the salaries? There's just not enough money for it.
Pretend to be an expert on where the government exactly is going to find the money for it. All I can say is that in the context of the employment landscape of India, this is something which is very much needed. You have more than 10 crore youth who are aged above 15, that is within the working age bracket in Bihar, and 1 crore in that context is not a very big number. And yes, if there is a whole lot of investment which has already been announced going to take place in Bihar by way of construction infra projects and all, and let's say factory infrastructure comes up, there is more foreign investment that they are able to attract also, which so many other states, especially from southern India, have been able to do. Then you don't really have to look at just the government spend for doing this. It could attract a lot of private investment as well, which in turn can create a lot of jobs. Can 1 crore jobs happen in the next 5 years? I'm not sure, but directionally, it is the right number to target. And even that is just 10% of the youth population. And Bihar is one of those states which is still having a fertility rate that is higher than replacement levels. India as a whole is break even at this point in time with respect to fertility rates just matching replacement levels. But Bihar is still growing. It has a very large youth population. And if most of those have to emigrate out of Bihar in search of jobs elsewhere, that's not really a sustainable model. So Bihar will have to attract external investment, not only from domestic private investors, but also from, foreign investors. And they'll have to do what some of the states such as Tamil Nadu, Karnataka, even UP in the recent past, and consistently states like Maharashtra and Gujarat have managed to achieve. And to your point, that's the
Right.
only way they
Right,
can
Mr.
escape the trap
Subramanian,
of.
point well taken. Now, you are saying there is a possibility. I want to take a step back and understand how many jobs are actually there. Is there a fair counting on that front first?
No, like I said, there are about 60 crore plus people who are actively engaged in the workforce in India, and that is a fair count. In fact, that represents a labor force participation rate of hardly about 2/3, right? We have about 90 crore people in India who are in the working age, but only 60 odd crore people are participating. So there is no attempt to fudge that.
Just to put
number.
forward
You are
one
trying to
point,
say
when you
that all
say
90 crore people who are
labor
eligible are
force
working.
participation, the latest data which is suggested is around 43%, which is one of the lowest in Bihar. I mean, we can go on and on in terms of the points, counterpoints, and the data points, which is we are not saying it. It is just the state budget which was presented by the Bihar government has mentioned these kind of points. But Mr. Srivastav, I want to come to you when you are saying that the voters will not see these promises, the promises which may not be fulfilled, whether you talk about jobs, whether you talk about the sustainability of this kind of distributions of freebies which are there. So then what will voters see?
Well, let me first pick on the other point, which my esteemed fellow panelist is making. I am in complete agreement, 60 crore workforce, whereas 90 crore people are employed, 1 crore jobs can be created. But just look at the, I'm sorry to use the word, look at the absurdity of it all. For a dispensation which has been running the state government for 2 decades now, just 6 days before going to the first phase of polls, they come up with a 1 crore job scheme. So it's kind of ludicrous. And one can be futuristic, optimistic, everything, but you have to put things in perspective vis-a-vis the past 20 years. So if you create jobs in lakhs over a decade, and you expect to create a crore jobs, so that's why I think the people are not such babes in the wood, if you may. They are not so innocent and so vulnerable also. They understand. I think the issue will be, do they find the Mahagathbandhan a viable, suitable, working alternative to the NDA? Is there, if at all, is there any real fatigue with NDA? Is Nitish Kumar past his prime? The ambivalence on Nitish Kumar, whether he will be or he won't be the chief minister. Today there was the manifesto release which ended in 30 seconds. This would have been a great opportunity for Nitish Kumar to come and speak in detail and elaborate in detail about the manifesto and set to rest all those questions about his health and faculties and how alert he is or not. So, and nobody buys Tejasvi's 2.5 crore jobs that to each family. So these are things which will not matter. Nor do I think will this constant harping back of some jungle Raj, even if it was true, even if it was a jungle Raj, it happened 2 decades ago. You have 1.7 crore voters who are in the age group of 18 to 29 who have never seen that so-called jungle Raj. So I think the track record of this government will be one issue. The overall situation in the state will be one issue. The credibility of opposition led by Tejasvi, how people buy it will be one issue. And of course, like it has for since kingdom come in Bihar politics, the caste arithmetic, the local equations on ground, which bloc is supporting whom, how many different caste leaders are there, that will be another issue. And of course, one factor will be if what kind of an impact will Prashant Kishore and his Jan Suraj party have on the ground? Will they really cut into votes? If yes, then whose votes will they cut into more? Those will be the issues which will be
Absolutely.
deciding the election outcome or the voting pattern.
Absolutely. In fact, I think the larger conversation here should be about freebies and the freebie culture that seems to be on the rise here. Mr. Balasubramaniam, now, if I remember correctly, the Supreme Court earlier this year had said that with all these freebies being doled out just before the elections, we are basically creating a class of parasites. And to be honest, both sides are responsible for everything. They're offering free electricity, healthcare, education, ration. The big question is who exactly pays for this electricity? Who runs these hospitals? Who pays for the teachers? When everything that, technically should be generating some sort of a value for the government, everything is given out, doled out for free, are we creating a welfare state or an entitlement trap? Because eventually people will get used to it. And studies, for example, the Niti Aayog report of 2023 has also shown that excessive freebies basically kill economic growth. Is Bihar now being set up for a further fiscal crisis?
Yeah, it's a difficult balance to strike. If you look at the history of developed countries as well, initially they all started off by being welfare states. In fact, even now there are several developed countries which have some form of welfareism that is going on, right? And That is how it will continue to be. To what degree which state needs at what point in time, it's a very difficult call to make. But yes, for long-term sustenance, you need to create jobs rather than dole out money. If the same amount of money is invested in creating jobs, that becomes much more sustainable than just a one-time, handout that is given. That is, in principle, always the better choice. But then, to get the machinery going, you also need to make sure that certain basic facilities are available, uh, if not entirely for free, but at least at a subsidized rate. For example, electricity, basic rations, water, and some kind of infrastructure. All these things need to be available, including education and health. That goes without saying, right? Because if you look at even the developed states within India, they score very, very high on these parameters: health, education, safety, and having basic amenities. If you don't have these things, it's very difficult for you to build uh, a constructive employment ecosystem in that state. So to get that machinery going, you may have to pour in a lot of money upfront, and that's how it usually is. There are certain states which had a huge opening balance post independence, and there are certain states which unfortunately started way behind. So could we have done better? Of course, yes, in hindsight. But yes, you have to manage all these states which are in different stages of evolution, and that's the reality of it.
Point well taken, Balasubramanian. Point well taken. You're making a very interesting point. The fact that, while we talk about all these things being given out for free, it is also very important to make sure that it's a welfare state, and that's what developed states did as well. Now, the other argument is, while the other developed states looked at welfare and gave a lot of money for all of these causes, they also spoke about, in the same breath, different ways to generate revenue. Now, for example, Bihar's own tax revenue is 59,520 crore. Now, a ballpark figure, if you look at the promises made in the manifesto, both the manifestos, in fact, goes over 10 lakh crore. But hardly there is anything spoken about any tangible way to generate more income in Bihar. So, the problem is not about giving anything for free or trying to uplift the lowest strata of the society. The problem is when that's the only thing you talk about. Where is the discussion about bringing in industries? Where is the discussion about bringing in jobs? Where is the discussion about setting up factories and bringing in different source of revenue as well? That's entirely missing in the manifesto.
Can I make a
No,
quick
that's
point?
exactly what needs to be done. So, if the government is hoping to bring in all of this investment through debt, if they fund it through taxpayer money entirely, it's not really going to work out. It's not sustainable. It's going to create a huge gap in our own books. It's not going to be healthy for our economy. So, but then the broader agenda of the government seems to be to move more and more people from farm to non-farm jobs, which are more productive and hence will pay more as well. And to answer your question, the important metric for us to look at to see if a state is actually developing is not just where it is right now from the perspective of what their average income is. If you look at that, the income per capita is, of course, as you called out earlier, one of the, if not the lowest. I think it ranks 35 out of 36 states plus union territories in India. But then it is also growing at the fastest rate across all the 36 states and UTs in India. It's growing at about 11.5, 12%. And that is singularly the most important metric, because your income per capita is directly correlated to your GDP per capita. And that is an India level problem. It is not a Bihar level problem. Bihar probably is, ranked like how India is ranked in the world. While India may be rank 5, rank 4, rank 3 in terms of global GDP, nominal terms. In PPP terms, we are definitely rank 3. But if you look at GDP per capita, we are ranked at 135 or 140. Now, that's the real problem. That's an India scale problem, like I said. Now, within India, there are states like Bihar which lag significantly behind. But is it really growing is the question. You cannot really blame them for where they are. But are they really moving the needle or not is the question. So if so much money is being poured into the state, but if the GDP per capita and hence the income per capita aren't really moving forward, then that is the question we should be asking. But that doesn't seem to be the case. It's number one right now in terms of growth of income per capita. If that keeps happening, then that's a true indicator of success. It means that people are definitely better off today than they were in the past, and hopefully they will continue to be better off in the future as well.
Point well taken, but let me put forward one more fact. The 42% of the state revenue is tied to the committed expenditure, and hence this question is very much valid when you announce these kind of freebies or the poll promises, and you have a projection of 22% GDP growth that was made by Bihar state government. where are you going to create these? Where is the money for that? And that's a valid question. But Mr. Srivastav, as you mentioned, many of the voters will take it with a pinch of salt or may not take it seriously. But point being, what is the alternate? Why parties keep on making these kind of promises which may not be fulfilled, and if at all, someone will pay for it?
See, that's why some people think that competitive politics and elections are increasingly becoming a bit of a farce in terms of promises. See, the bigger question by what you are referring to, Ankur, earlier, is this freebies, how much of a dent it causes to economy, and you refer to some court judgment that it's creating parasites. All those things have a point. They are not entirely incorrect. But in a country, let's face it, we are a democracy. A large number of people are poor. So how many tens of crores? I think 80 crores is the number who are getting a free 5 kg ration or whatever that number is. So we have to face the reality. And the bigger issue is, I still think these freebies, the total would come less to the kind of haircuts Indian banks take in NCLT settlements. That's ridiculous. The kind of crony capitalism, the waste of money elsewhere. So when you really compare and put things in perspective, these freebies are not eating into the Indian economy. It's the other things which are eating into Indian economies, or maybe it has come down, but which have traditionally been a parasite or a deemak kind of a thing for the Indian economy. That's the thing to be addressed. So these freebie announcements, so 1 crore jobs or 2.5 crore jobs, I won't be surprised if not even 10% of that is ultimately generated, and we can be talking about it again whenever the next Bihar or some other election comes around. That's not what is really hurting the economy. The economy is being there are other trouble points or pain points which are there. So which we seldom talk about, very honestly.
All right, we'll leave it at that. Thank you so
Yeah,
much,
fair enough.
Mr. Srivastav and Mr.
Yes.
Balasubramaniam, for joining at this hour. And it is the voters finally who will decisively say whether these are just promises or there's a practicality in it. And all the economics that matters, end of the day, is how much practical application of this manifesto happens. But with this, it's time to take a very quick break. After the break, a lot coming up.